Throughout his warlike history, man has taken animals into battle to help him build armies and empires. No symbol is more potent than the bald eagle, spirit of victory and freedom, and still the winged emblem of the United States. The spread eagle was adopted by many others, from the Crusaders to the 20th century armies of Prussia and Germany. While a majestic lion, king of the beasts, accompanied British forces in distant corners of the globe. The wolf was worn by Roman standard-bearers to fill the soldiers with courage and the enemy with fear. This was the role of beasts of war. Of course, there are many ways to frighten your enemies. In Papua New Guinea, the Wagi warriors decked themselves with feathers from the Ragiana bird of paradise. In the wild, male birds use these bright red plumes to dazzle a potential mate. The idea here is much the same, to overwhelm those watching with sheer exhibitionism. The jaguar, elusive spirit of Central and South America, inspired an elite band of Mayan and Aztec warriors. But in 1519, Hernando Cortés and his Spanish conquistadors arrived. With them, they brought an even more fearsome creature than the jaguar. The horse. To the Aztecs, who had never seen a horse before, it looked as though man and rider were one, some new and terrifying beast of war. They didn't recover until the first horse was killed, and its head held up to show it was not invincible. In medieval times, knights fought under the sign of the peacock, symbol of immortality. According to legend, the peacock's flesh does not decay, which must have seemed a good omen for a man about to risk his life. In the European age of chivalry, a knight might pledge himself before God, the Holy Virgin, the ladies, and the peacock before entering the fray. Boosting morale before battle has been the job of thousands of beasts of war. From familiar faces to make the soldiers feel at home, to a shot of courage, and even a little comic relief. A goat might seem an unlikely mascot, but almost any animal could provide comfort and encouragement during the grim preparation for combat. Goats were popular in World War II, but bears, deer, and even mongooses have all been drafted in for good luck at one time or another. Often, animals were smuggled in under a soldier's coat, or swapped for whiskey, tobacco, or some other luxury item. However they ended up in the forces, most military animals were cherished and protected by their human comrades. Man's best friend has always been good at keeping its companion's spirits up. and never more so than in the trenches of World War I. Other beasts were less welcome, however. Over the months of occupation, the trenches became infested with vermin, and many dogs earned their stripes on rat patrol. While the men prepared their weapons and equipment, the dogs were trained to keep the trenches free of uninvited guests. A dog that couldn't pay its way would sometimes end up being shot, but most became loyal and indispensable members of the team. Long before the first shot is fired or the first blow exchanged, getting ready for battle takes a huge amount of time and energy, often in harsh, mundane circumstances. For a human being, this labor can be backbreaking. From cleaning and polishing to transporting vast numbers of men, supplies, and equipment, the logistics of going to war are hard work. There's a limit to what men can manage alone, and many times when only animals can provide the vital extra muscle power. Even in peacetime, the part played by horses and other beasts of war is acknowledged by staging mock-ups of battle on special occasions. Polishing the guns and oiling the wheels of war today gives us a glimpse of the time and effort that went into waging war in the past, even before the battle itself had begun. Some tasks were too big even for horses, but not for the trusty ox. Oxen could travel off the beaten track and keep their nerve under enemy fire. Their incredible strength and stoicism means that in India and elsewhere, man and beast rely on each other in times of peace as well. If you can't find an ox, you could always try putting a bear in its place, but they don't take so kindly to harnessing. Orphaned bear cubs were sometimes picked up by marching troops along the way and kept as a source of affection and entertainment, perhaps as a substitute teddy for a frightened young soldier. These pets often ended up having to earn their keep, like dogs and horses. Sometimes size is what's required, in which case it's a job for a giant. From fixing communication lines to dragging heavy loads, elephants have served the war effort for thousands of years. These intelligent creatures were first taken to war by the legendary General Hannibal. But fortunately for them, they were found to be too nervous and unsuitable for the front line. They didn't get off scot-free, however. Instead, they were put to work on the chain gang. A war doesn't run on weapons alone. It also consumes vast amounts of construction materials for transport, building bridges and boats. In the jungle, no machine can match the elephant. The incredible strength in this flexible trunk makes a man look as weak as a kitten. A full-grown elephant can lift objects many times a man's weight. But humans learn to tame this strength and use it for tasks that they could never have managed alone. In some parts of the world, just getting to the battlefield can be half the battle. The more extreme the conditions, the better it is to use local animals, animals that are used to the climate and terrain. High among the snow peaks of Tibet, the yak is king. Wild yaks are found at altitudes of up to 6,000 meters and are the masters of their bleak environment. Up here, modern technology is 1,000,000 miles away. The only way to get anywhere is by yak power. The earring is a name tag, not a fashion accessory. Despite their scruffy appearance, yaks are extremely sturdy, able to carry on in freezing cold or burning sun. A different face, with 2 rows of eyelashes, hairy ears, nostrils that close, and the ability to go without drinking for days at a time. This creature has adapted to a life of sun and sand, and is the leading form of transport in its native lands. It's the camel, warship of the desert. Camels are also easy to refuel. They eat almost anything. The Bedouins, tribal nomads of the Middle East, first domesticated camels around 5,000 years ago, and since then, man and beast have become inseparable. So important is the camel to the Bedouin that it's known as Ata Allah, or God's gift. This is why. Camels can carry huge loads over huge distances, in places where most other beasts would fear to tread. They store water and fat in their hump as emergency rations. Splayed feet are another secret of the camel's success. They help to spread the weight and stop it from sinking into the sand. Even today, the camel train is often the fastest way to cross the desert. In the past, it was the fastest way to go to war. Perhaps the most famous camel warrior of all was Lawrence of Arabia, who helped the Arabs overthrow the Turks. Camels stayed calm under enemy fire. The Afghans even invented a cannon that could be fired from camelback. Camels could be stubborn and unpredictable, but they carried man into parts that other beasts could not reach. Over the centuries, one animal has emerged as man's greatest asset, on and off the battlefield. the horse. Much more highly strung than the ox or camel, the horse takes more time and care to keep it ready for action. But it's also much more manageable, largely because of a revolutionary invention around the 5th century. The saddle, which developed from a heavy wooden box into a masterpiece of engineering. Stirrups were another big step forward, giving a warrior greater control and confidence than ever before. Preparing a mount for the cavalry was well worth the effort. Whatever your weapon, sword, rifle, arrows or spear, it's much more effective from horseback. And in a crisis, 4 legs move much faster than 2. But it all takes time, and better accessories aren't really the secret of better horsemanship. Perhaps the finest horsemen in the world live here on the steppes of Mongolia, a harsh environment where man and horse grow lean and mean. In the 13th century, hordes of Mongol warriors rode to victory under the legendary leader Genghis Khan, eventually conquering more than half the known world. They traveled light, on small ponies for maximum speed, and were said to attack like a swarm of bees, too quick for cavalries bogged down with heavy equipment. On these epic campaigns, men drank the blood of their horses to keep them alive. Centuries later, this bond between man and horse is as tight as ever, and the two still seem to live and move as one. This is the favored weapon of Genghis Khan's horsemen, the bow and arrow. In modern-day Mongolia, archery skills are still passed down from parent to child. In the old days, the archers went in first to divide the enemy forces. Then the lancers came in for the kill. In medieval Europe, lancers practiced their aim in a war game, the joust. The idea was to knock the opponent from his saddle, ready to finish him off on the ground. Jousting was part of the heraldic tradition and helped keep the knights in shape during peacetime. It wasn't a common man's sport, however. He would have been sent into battle on foot. Medieval knights always rode stallions, symbols of noble courage. They wouldn't have been seen dead on a Mongol pony. In the age of chivalry, these knightly duels became a way to entertain the public, to settle disputes, and to impress the ladies, much like many sports today. The idea of jousting is said to have come from male deer rutting, clashing their giant antlers together in combat. In the wild, this is how males work out who's boss and who gets to mate with the females. Apparently, this inspired man to try similar tactics. Jousting was popular for hundreds of years, and signature colors emphasized the partnership of man and horse. A jousting stallion needed strength rather than speed, not to carry the man, but to carry what he wore: heavy armor. Taking a fall in this outfit could be fatal, even with no enemy in sight. When jousting finally went out of fashion, it was because the nature of war itself had changed forever. Hand-to-hand combat was replaced by death from a distance, the gun, and that meant different jobs for beasts of war. When the moment finally comes to risk your life, warfare of any kind is a lonely business. Those who went over the top in the First World War belonged to loyal regiments, but once in no man's land, they walked alone.
Go on, lads, quick as you can. Come on, let's for king and country.
In many ways, they were sitting ducks, and they knew it. Around 200 BC, foot soldiers fighting the Romans tried to hide behind something much bigger than themselves. Nearly 40 elephants were taken by the General Hannibal across the Alps from North Africa into Italy. Many died of cold along the way, but enough of these giants remained to strike fear into the hearts of the Romans. Elephants were mainly a weapon of psychological warfare. The trouble was, elephants weren't so keen to join the army. They often panicked and fled, trampling men on their own side as well as the enemy. In the thick of battle, animals were often given the most risky assignments, such as carrying communication lines from one trench to another. This crack force of canine messengers was highly valued. In fact, if captured, they would often end up working for the enemy. They saved thousands of lives on both sides in the First World War. Different breeds of dog suit different tasks, but the basic qualifications for a military mutt are the same as those for a man: loyalty, energy, and enthusiasm. The US Army trained dogs to disable the enemy by nobbling their right arm. Left-handed opponents had a lucky escape. But dogs of war are nothing new. The Romans kept squadrons of mastiffs to take into battle, and the Germans set up canine training camps as early as the 1890s. By World War II, dog messengers were mostly unemployed. Radios had arrived, but so had mines, and dogs were taught to sniff them out. Like other jobs for the dogs, minesweeping often meant working closely with a human partner. One Russian mongrel, Zuka, and his master were flown into wartime hotspots as a team. They once cleared 2,000 mines in 18 days. During the Vietnam War and other conflicts, dogs would also warn the men of booby traps or ambush. Sentry duty is in many ways a dog's ideal job. There's a lot of barking involved, and excellent hearing is needed, both skills that dogs are particularly good at. They can also provide a little company on a long, monotonous watch. In Roman times, however, guard dogs were outclassed by geese. In 388 BC, it was honking, not barking, that saved Rome from an attack by the Gauls. A sleeping sentry woke up just in time to save the day, but his dogs got the chop. During these brawls with the Gauls, another bird joined the ranks of the Roman army, the humble pigeon. Thanks to its highly developed homing instinct, a messenger pigeon could make it back to base from many miles away. Over the centuries, army pigeons have flown far and wide, from the time of Genghis Khan to the 2 world wars. British pigeon fanciers donated 100,000 birds at the start of the First World War, and the Germans even ran a pigeon service school. But pigeon post wasn't 100% reliable. Snipers or bad weather could undermine the bravest birds, and the secrets they were carrying often fell into enemy hands. Pigeons were often the partners of messenger dogs. Satan, a military mongrel, became a hero in the First World War. He delivered carrier pigeons to a village near Verdun, where a French battalion had been trapped by German shelling. The pigeons were the men's last hope of contact with the outside world. They were sent by nearby Allied forces to ask if the battalion needed help. It was too late for Satan, who had been shot twice in the line of duty. But his courage allowed the French to send an SOS by return of post, accepting the offer of reinforcements. Satan's little envoy carried the hopes and fears of the entire battalion. A long shot, as the French were well aware, but by some miracle the pigeon made it through and saved their skins. Much smaller creatures became weapons of war, their natural behavior employed to devastating effect. Tiny, but deadly, the African killer bee can break the nerve of even the toughest warrior. Though bees themselves die once they've lost their sting, they will sacrifice themselves to defend their hives, so they make highly effective allies. During the East Africa campaign of 1914, the Germans threw beehives into the path of the British, with terrifying results. Bees at arms were used in other conflicts, including Vietnam. Sometimes hives were attached to tripwires, and it's even said the North Vietnamese trained bees to attack American uniforms. Other beasts of war look entirely harmless. Spiders, for example, were enlisted too. They never appeared on the front line, but they created something that did: their web. Because it's so fine and yet so flexible, spider's silk was ideal for the cross sights of guns. It's a natural shock absorber, and so was also used in bulletproof vests. Some spiders can churn out 100 meters of silk in less than an hour, and it's lighter and more elastic than anything yet produced by man. Spider silk also has antiseptic properties, so it was tested in special bandages. Animals worked alongside man in almost every sphere of combat, including the bomb squad. In one of the most elaborate strategies of World War II, the Americans tied small bombs onto Mexican free-tailed bats. The idea was to drop a cage full of bats by parachute over Japanese cities. The cage would open as it neared the ground. The bats would fly out and seek shelter in nearby buildings. Then one by one, they would explode. Just one problem. At high altitude, the cold temperatures sent the bats into a state of hibernation. When released, they simply plummeted unconscious to the ground and died. Bat bombs were never a hit. In another failed experiment, they blew up their own side's barracks and a general's car, so bats were never hired as permanent beasts of war. Dogs, however, were victims of their own success. In a gruesome twist to the use of messenger dogs, the Russians loaded them with highly charged explosives and a long antenna. This cunning plan involved training the dog to run underneath an enemy tank. When the dog's antenna struck the side of the tank, both dog and tank would be blown to smithereens. Once again, however, the use of beasts as suicide bombers backfired. It turned out the dogs couldn't tell whose tank was whose. War at sea required specialist training. The American Navy recruited underwater bomb detectors. Dolphins, user-friendly and intelligent, were an obvious choice. They were trained to locate mines in the water and also to plant electronic bugs on the side of enemy ships. Dolphin minesweepers worked all over the world, from Cuba to the Persian Gulf. They used their natural sonar system, more complex than anything scientists have yet come up with. The dolphin, one of the natural world's most peaceful and intelligent animals, soon became one of our closest allies in war. Dolphins are deep-sea divers, far more versatile than human scuba divers. Unlike a man, they have collapsible lungs, which stop them from getting the bends. But man has only scratched the surface of the dolphin's mysterious powers. It travels and communicates in ways that we can barely comprehend. In the future, who knows what the dolphin may teach us? As well as detecting enemy bombs and boats, dolphins learned to identify enemy divers. Above the surface, they were taught to come to heel alongside boats, like dogs on land. By hitching a ride on the bow waves, they can keep up with vessels that travel much faster than themselves. Because they have more brain than brawn, dolphins were given more sophisticated tasks than other beasts of war. But they were also sent to their deaths, just as surely as Russian suicide dogs. From dolphin mine detectors to seagull spies, their mission: to spot submarines. By releasing food near their own submarines, the British tried to train the gulls to gather above a dark shape in the water. That way they could pinpoint enemy subs. Another brainwave involved sending seagulls to land on enemy periscopes in the hope they would cover the sites with droppings. But seagull spies never really took off. Sea lions, and even larger ocean mammals such as killer whales, can rival dolphins for their sonar skills. and are trained to locate beepers inside objects on the ocean floor. They are used to recover sunken boats and aircraft, and also dummy torpedo shells used in military training exercises. These can weigh a ton or more and lie at great depths. But man's ocean allies don't actually have to lift them. Once they've tracked down the beeper, they slip a harness over the torpedo's nose, so it can be hauled by cables to the surface. Most animals work best if there's an element of fun involved. Man took advantage of the sea lion's natural curiosity to keep them interested. But like dolphins and whales, they aren't always keen to play man's war games. Deserters are common. Just as in the human forces, a piece of fish or squid could easily tempt a sea lion away from its post. This is one of nature's best noses, and another animal mine detector. Champion of champions is the red Duroc pig, which can sniff out explosives more than a foot beneath the surface. Even the best trained dog can't equal that. This army definitely marches on its stomach. Pigs may have been the best at the job of mine detecting, but they were victims of discrimination. No one wanted to work with them. A pig on a lead was apparently not good for military morale, and porkers never managed to usurp the dog as man's best friend. Dogs and other animals were more effective than metal detectors. They could also sniff out bombs made of plastic, wood, and glass. They could also tell if the ground had been disturbed. British sniffer dogs have saved human lives in many trouble spots. From Northern Ireland to the Falklands War, they can track down just about anything, from weapons and ammunition to the people who use them. One of the biggest enemies in war is silent but deadly: gas. But gas can be detected by tiny noses. In the First World War, around 90,000 troops were killed by chlorine and mustard gas, and since then, chemical warfare has become a soldier's nightmare. An expert was called in: the canary. Traditionally used in coal mines, canaries were kept in trenches and tunnels as an early warning system. A canary is 15 times more sensitive to gas than humans. If its song stopped, it had probably dropped. Gas masks are a fact of life in modern combat, and they save the lives of many on the battlefield, men and beasts alike. Dogs, for example, have special snout-shaped masks to protect their valuable nose. Some faces are harder to fit than others, but even horses' lives have been saved by gas-proof nose bags. The threat of chemical weapons continues today. They've been used in recent years in the Middle East and elsewhere. Gas is one enemy that can't be shot down. it can only be shut out. When the battle's over and the aftermath begins, time is often crucial in saving victims of war. After the London Blitz in September 1940, dogs showed their true colours once again by helping to search through the wreckage. To do their job, they had to brave a dog's worst nightmare: fire. But nothing stopped them sniffing out people buried in the rubble. One Alsatian called Irma even signalled if a person was alive or dead by either barking joyfully or sadly wagging her tail. Anywhere man has been, dogs have been too. On land, at sea, even in the air. Red Cross dogs were the heroes of the skies, reaching places desperate for help. Sometimes all they could do was bring a little comfort to a dying soldier. Surely it can't be enjoying this, but look at the wagging tail. Humans have been inspired by dogs time and again. It's often said that no dog ever hesitated at going over the top. When the chips were down, beasts fought as bravely as man. But just like their human comrades, bravery couldn't always save them from the worst. On battlefields of every time and place, animal corpses have lain alongside those of men and women. Animals weren't always well rewarded for their sacrifice. On both sides of the battlefield in World War I, thousands of injured horses were butchered for their meat when supply lines were cut. Amazingly, however, many dogs of war made it safely back to England. Some won a special animal award, the Dickon Medal, for their gallantry. Horses, too, are a key part of any victory celebrations. Today, the contribution made by horses in wartime is honoured in peacetime, too. Special ceremonies on royal and state occasions help remind us that we couldn't have done it without them. These guns were first used on the battlefields of World War I, but the routine of preparing and firing them is exactly the same today, and it keeps alive the memory of all those who were there for real. It's a celebration of loyalty, courage, and sheer hard work. over the world, horses, dogs, and other animals have helped man face the music in the worst of circumstances, providing inspiration through their strength and fortitude. Whoever the winners or losers, there are always heroes to remember. Many of those heroes are beasts of war.